So please do that. So welcome everybody. I'm Masaoka. I'm the CEO of the California Association of Nonprofits. We say CalNonprofits for short. And this is a nonprofit town hall with Assemblymember Randy Voepel. And joining me from CalNonprofits is our policy director, Lucy Salcido, and she'll be giving some information later. And then we also have two of our staff providing some of the behind the camera support today, Christina Metropolis and Karina Paredes Arzola. Sorry, I keep getting that wrong. So anyway, thanks everybody for being here. So let me just say a couple of things. This town hall has just been advertised to people in the Assembly members district, so everybody is very much local and very much people that are familiar with the area and with his work and his role. And it's also, as you know, this is an extremely unusual time where nonprofits are both on one hand extremely visible, right? We're seeing nonprofits every day on the news, whether it's a health clinic or assistance for children with autism or all kinds of other things. And at the same time, it's one where nonprofits on one hand are working at 10 times their usual capacity and their usual hours. They're a food bank, for example, or a health clinic. And on the other hand, we're seeing our theaters and our museums just completely closed, and everybody on every point of the spectrum in between. So I think it's just a very challenging time for all of us. So to introduce yourself, I might introduce you to the Assembly member. Let me just say a word about him, and then he's kind of moderating. He's going to be the MC of today's town hall. So as you probably guessed from his hat, maybe, or the stuff in back of him, he's a Vietnam veteran, having served 2 terms in the Army. He had a
Navy. These are my dog tags. Wore them over twice and brought them home. They didn't get sent to my mother.
That's good to hear. I have to. I'm actually wearing my father's dog tags today.
Hoorah.
After a very successful career in the insurance business, he entered a career in politics. Yeah, I think many of you know him from serving on the city council and as the mayor in his hometown, Santee. Then he's serving right now in the California State Assembly. And I think, one of the things he's shown his appreciation and understanding of nonprofits by being one of 30 legislators to sign a letter to the governor, along with 1,200 nonprofit organizations asking for contract relief for nonprofits that have contracts with the state. Because as many of you know, we can't do the work we thought we were going to do. We can't make those pre-adoption home visits like we used to. We can't serve the seniors in the senior community centers as we did. So we're all doing other things, but it's important for us to have the state give us some relief in adapting those contracts more quickly than they've been able to up till now. And so we really appreciate that support, Assembly member. And then also I just have to say that in addition, he's just showing his, commitment to working with nonprofits by being here today, because, he could have been, I don't know, it's too early, I guess, to say you could have been having a martini, but he could have been doing some relaxing from
Not too early.
relaxing from a tough week in Sacramento. But he's here to answer people's questions, but also to hear from you. So it's important we believe it's very important for nonprofits and elected officials to be able to interact directly, and this is just a great and important opportunity for that. So let me hand it over to you, Assembly member. Thanks very much.
Question. In back of you, is that Japanese or Chinese?
It's Japanese, yeah.
I thought it was Japanese, but 50-50 guess. You roll the dice.
Yep.
So to everybody, especially to RiseUp Industries, I've been working very hard for convicts and people on parole. That really moves my heart. We've recently done a bill that if someone's incarcerated and they volunteer to be a firefighter for the wildfires, that we give them extra credit off their parole and off their sentence. So hopefully that will get signed in. So there are a lot of things up in Sacramento that we're doing. And even though I'm a conservative Republican, when it comes to nonprofits, incarcerated people, etc., I'm damn liberal. So that's that.
So Assembly Member, do you want to make some opening comments about what you're seeing right now, how nonprofits are being affected by the virus, and what you think government should be doing or it should not be doing to help nonprofits and the people that they're serving?
Okay, anybody that knows me knows you get the straight skinny, okay? This is straight up. Right now, because of the virus and the economic shutdown, California is basically completely dysfunctional, as are many other states. We don't know what our budget is. We have no clue, and we have to approve some kind of budget by June 15th, which is next week. I think it's Monday yeah. So we don't know what we're going to be approving, and it will change constantly. And the legislature is somewhat in revolt against the governor because the governor has basically invalidated over 172 laws, and he's made various executive directives, over 80 to 90 now. So the state is actually being run by Gavin Newsom, which may or may not be a good thing, I don't know. So number one to all of you is the whole system's dysfunctional because of COVID-19. Number two is we have, think of this as everyone knows the game of tennis, right? You knock a ball back and forth. So what we're looking at right now, in my humble opinion, is posturing for the budget. The governor came out with a very stringent budget, major cuts to you guys, and all the things that we cherish. And the basic rule on the first budget was the strong, rich, and powerful don't get cut. The weak and the needy do. I mean, that's the way I saw it. So the legislature bit back and took out all those cuts. Now, here's where I get political and controversial, but that's why people talk to me. What's going to happen is the state of California and many other states are going to the federal government saying, help us, bail us out. So what will happen is, if California is not bailed out to our satisfaction, we'll simply blame it on the current administration. So this tennis ball is going to go back and forth. How it ends up, who wins the game, I have no idea. But my basic feeling is everyone will lose.
Well, that's a cheerful way to start a Friday morning. Thanks very much.
You know, but heads up, be ready for anything.
Right. I want to just welcome all the people that are continuing to sign on from various different places around the district. So thanks very much, and we'll get a chance to get to some of your questions. And if we don't get to your questions, you should also know that the Assembly members' staff is participating in this call. And so those are important things for them to understand that people want to know about, or not necessarily questions, comments you have about what you think is going on and recommendations that you have for the Assembly member and for the Assembly. So let's just take a minute to have kind of a federal update from our Policy Director, Lucy Salcido Carter. But you can also probably see on your screen that we also have two nonprofits joining us, and they'll be talking a little bit later. Mark Klaus from the Home of Guiding Hands. Hi, Mark. And Joe Gilbreath from RiseUp Industries, who both are really well known. So welcome, you guys. Lucy, how about a little bit of an update on federal? What are some of the most important things that nonprofits need to know about the federal scene?
Sure, I'd be happy to give an update. I'm sure many of you have heard of the CARES Act, which was passed at the end of March, and it did a lot of really important things. And some of the things that it did for nonprofits in particular is that it created a program called the Paycheck Protection program, which is a loan program through the Small Business Administration, and I'll talk a little bit more about it. I'm sure many of you have heard about it. Hopefully, many of you have applied and received a loan through that program. It did some other things. The CARES Act did some other things as well. It added an advance program to the EIDL loan program, also through the SBA. And that allows folks who are applying for the EIDL program to get up to a $10,000 advance program right away, advance on their loan right away. And that's a forgivable advance. So those are two programs that came out of the CARES Act. It also provides for 50% coverage by the federal government of reimbursement on unemployment insurance, so for self-insured nonprofits. And then it does a whole lot of things, including individual relief programs and things for small businesses. It also provided state and local government funding. The Assembly member mentioned that. So one of the problems with the PPP in that first round of the CARES Act was that many nonprofits were not able to apply.
Yep.
Because they didn't have relationships with the lending institutions that were on that first list who were providing loan applications. So that was really quite discouraging. And then the money ran out. Fortunately, there was a second round of funding through what some people call the CARES Act 1.5. And that provided additional billions of dollars to the PPP. Another thing that it did that was really helpful for nonprofits is that it provided a certain amount of funding for small lending institutions, so community banks and credit unions, and that increased the access for nonprofits. So there is still money in that second round. So if you have not applied for PPP and you think you might qualify, please do apply. There's a new federal act that just was signed last week that I'm going to talk about in a minute, but it ends the PPP at the end of this month. So June 30th is the last day to apply for the PPP. So please, and I'll put a website up on the chat for the SBA and where you can find out about lending institutions and all of that. So the new act that just passed last week is called the PPP Flexibility Act. And for nonprofits who have a PPP, it extends your forgiveness period. I mean, one of the amazing things about the PPP is that it is a forgivable loan. So if you jump through the right hoops, you don't have to pay that loan back. And those hoops have changed now because of this new federal law that was just passed. Instead of having 8 weeks for your forgiveness period, you now are going to have 24 weeks. And I can go into some of the other details maybe a little bit later, but it's really important for folks who have PPP loans because it will give you more time. You also don't have to put as much money in it. You don't have to cover payroll with the loan, as much of payroll with the loan as you did in the previous. So I'll cover a little bit more about that later. But nonprofits that we're hearing from are concerned about the federal funding for state and local governments. I mean, you connected it with the state budget cuts, Assembly member, and nonprofits are concerned that those cuts are going to affect the programs that they're providing and that are so fundamental to their communities. So, we do hope that federal funding will come through, at least what we've been hearing from nonprofits, and that it would help with some of those state budget cuts. So those are just some of the themes that we've been hearing that relate to what's happening at the federal level.
Thanks, Lucy. Let's hear from some of our local nonprofits. Assembly member, do you want to introduce our two nonprofits?
RiseUp Industries and Home of Guiding Hands.
Great, thanks. Mark, do you want to start?
I'd be happy to start. Thank you. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to participate this morning. A little bit about Home of Guiding Hands. Home of Guiding Hands is a nonprofit providing services in San Diego and Imperial counties. We support about 4,000 individuals annually with developmental disabilities, children, adolescents, and adults. Provide a wide variety of services. Primarily, we started out as a residential setting, and we currently provide 31 supports in 31 community-based residential homes, 4-person, 6-person homes, respite services, and a wide variety of other community-based supports to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. The COVID that we're dealing with now has, I tell people I've been in this industry for 40 years. I keep going back to my CEO handbook, and none of this is in there. How we're navigating this is truly a challenge. Within 1 week's time, we added 2,000 hours, 2,000 direct care hours, staff working in our 31 homes because the community shut down. So as we look at that, keeping our individuals safe, health and safety is a priority for all of us. Our individuals by definition are medically fragile. We have seen some assistance from the state in terms of, assisting with those extra staffing costs. Our community-based programs, people that have jobs in the community or live independently, it's been a challenge to, go out into the community. We've been at a stay-at-home order for so long that we've really pivoted, and I know everyone's using that term now. But I'll give a shout out to your tech people and this virtual services for our young children. We provide services to over 1,000 children birth to 3. Is typically done in a home-based setting. We're now doing that virtually. Not having one therapist go into 20 or 30 different homes a day. So there's a lot of positive things coming out of this. The community in which we operate, San Diego and Imperial County, has been tremendous. The support, the collaboration between nonprofits, our for-profit employers helping out with food, helping out with supplies that were needed at the very beginning has been outstanding. I could not be prouder of the San Diego and Imperial County communities for coming together. And to me, it really is rewarding. Some of the challenges that we had, Jan, at the beginning were PPE, personal protective equipment. We went from not needing any to needing thousands and thousands a day. This community has come together with the assistance of Assemblymember Voepel and other legislators funding for that equipment for a very medically fragile group of people. We have had at HGH, we're the kind of distribution site for all developmental disability providers right now in San Diego and Imperial. We've given out several 100,000 masks, sanitizers, wow, baby wipes. It's just been amazing to see what people are doing. Coming out of this, what our next steps are, or maybe I should wait for you to ask me questions. But what's coming out of this is scary. And as the Assembly member said, we overnight, essentially added 2,000 hours a week of staff to protect our staff that weren't going to school, not going to their jobs, not going to day services. Yep. And the health and safety is our #1 priority.
So Mark, just tell us a little bit more about it. So what does health and safety look like in some of your residential homes, for example? How are you managing that?
We have limited staff interactions. At times we've had staff that would float between maybe 2 or 3 different homes within kind of a quadrant. We've limited the number of staff going in. We have, we're not allowing staff to work in multiple homes. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In best case scenario, it's 2 staff primarily on every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 6 individuals. We also have homes that are higher need homes for adolescents, with some some behavioral challenges that's staffed with, during the daytime, 4 staff. So adding those hours has been tremendous. The issue is the uncertainty of where we're going. Monday, June 15th, the commitment that we've got from Sacramento, and I take the Assembly and the Senate out of this at this point, that residential is a priority. Well, the governor's budget proposed a fairly significant decrease in funding for residential homes. As our costs continue to skyrocket in terms of PPE, sanitation, all of those things. And it's scary. Other proposed cuts in the governor's budget, to HGH, total about $2 million. And, if that happens, and I've been doing this a long time, I've heard many colleagues for years say, if we don't get this, we're going to shut down, or we're not going to be able to provide services. This is the first time in 40 years that I have gone on record saying, if this happens, we will be shutting down services. And people will lose their homes, and they'll go to higher cost settings that aren't doing as well as our nonprofit community is doing right now. Assemblymember Voepel's support, the entire Assembly and Senate obviously has a different budget plan, the right budget plan, to make sure that nonprofits, whether it's, anything that is nonprofits, will be able to at least sustain ourselves as we come out of this in the next 6 months or 9 months or a year. They said, the playbook I have doesn't have an end date to it at this point. I don't think any of ours does. So we appreciate Randy's support, his advocacy for us and others. San Diego, I was looking at numbers, we have over 11,000 nonprofits in San Diego County, according to the University of San Diego. 125,000 people that are employed, and with a payroll in excess of $7 billion. It's a big component of our community. And I'm afraid that many of them are not going to be able to survive. So I probably took more than my 3 minutes. I'm sorry.
I really appreciate your comment about, I think it's important for us all to, just some of the other numbers from our research, 1 in every 14 California jobs is a nonprofit. We actually employ more people than construction. And a lot of people see nonprofits as sort of using California money, but the fact is nonprofits bring in $40 billion a year into California from out of state. So I think we bring in money, and I think that we're really economic drivers if you combine that with the jobs that we have, not to even mention the services and the volunteers. So thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Can I jump in real quick? So just want everyone to know that everything in Sacramento from the legislative side is run through committees. Even though I'm a Republican, the Democrats respect me and I work very well with them. And I am vice chair of more committees than I think any other Republican, I'm not sure. I'm vice chairman of long-term care and aging, which means we're in charge of all the nursing homes and many of the group homes in California. So I'm able to be an insider on that one, looking out for you guys. I'm also the vice chair of the Veterans Committee, and you may not know it, but we have 8 veterans homes in California. And interestingly enough, with COVID, we've had very few cases in any of the homes. Unlike New York, California has actually done a fair job. I can't say great job, but a fair job with COVID. So I am an analytical nerd. Although I grew up poor white trash in the backwoods of Missouri, I talk that way, but I am an analytical. I look at everything, I read everything, and I look at the budget, trying to find every little nook and cranny to poop some money for you guys any way I can. So that's that comment.
There's a question for, I think, for anybody here. It says, do board and care homes that have 8, 6 or fewer patients, does that count as group home?
I don't know. The rules and regulations are so intricate that I can't pull that out of my head.
Thanks.
And we have two different kind of homes. We have, 6-person homes and smaller. 25 of those are 6-person homes that are licensed by the Department of Healthcare Services, as the Assembly member mentioned. They're considered, funding very similar, if you will. The funding stream is similar to a nursing home.
Okay.
So, and that's an area just with those 30 homes. We're looking at, with the governor's proposal, a $600,000 plus deficit.
Wow.
With those cuts.
Yeah.
Thanks. Joe, tell us about RiseUp Industries.
Good. Thank you. Pleasure being here.
Hey, Joe.
Good morning. RiseUp Industries is a relatively new nonprofit. Our mission is to minimize street gang activity in San Diego by providing integrated gang prevention, gang intervention, and post-detention reentry for former gang-involved individuals. We're modeling our program after Homeboy Industries in LA, recognized as one of the most effective gang intervention and reentry programs in the country. Of our 3 prongs of prevention, intervention, and reentry, we started with our reentry program in 2016. We provide a comprehensive set of services, including counseling, mentoring, tattoo removal. And one of the key components of the program is job training and employment in our social enterprise, which is a CNC, computer numeric controlled machine shop. CNC machine operators is a trade that's in high demand and pays well. And so we train our guys predominantly on the job training, on contract machining work that generates revenue from the program and also gives them real world work experience, preparing them for employment after graduation. So with COVID-19, we had to close down our reentry program for about 10 weeks from March 23rd to May 29th. Wow. So we just reopened last week. During that time period when we were down, our machine shop was still being run by our staff, and we provided homework assignments for our guys to do at home, again, on the machining industry. And then we've also had an impact with some funding. Some of the foundations that we typically apply for grants from are focused on COVID-19, and so we've had some limitations in funding there. We did apply for the PPP loan and were awarded that, so we're very thankful for that. Because of COVID-19, we lost 2 of our members in our program. They were relatively new members. They just entered the program shortly before we had to close down. And I think because they didn't have this environment to be in, we lost them for the program. We're in the process of enrolling 2 new members next Monday. And so we're up and running again. There was some slowdown in the contract work for our machine shop, but that's beginning to turn around. In fact, there's some work coming back from China for some of our customers, so we're getting more work from them. Ironically, 2 of our customers have got quite a bit of workload to give to us, but ironically, that's mostly lathe work. We've got 1 lathe and we've got 4 CNC mills. And so with the demand for that work, we're in a position where we really need to buy a second lathe. And ironically, Haas, Haas Automation, who is the lead manufacturer of CNC equipment, has a 40% discount on the lathe that we want. So we've written a grant recently. Hopefully that grant will come through, allow us to make that purchase and be able to service these customers' needs, as well as providing additional training for our members. I think that's that's about where we are with COVID.
And Assembly member, I think you went to visit RiseUp Industries recently. Is that right?
That's correct. I think last year,
Last
and
August.
Gail, my chief of staff, bought their coffee. They sell coffee too.
It's delicious.
Yeah.
And Joe, I just ask you, what kind of homework can you give people when they don't have a lathe at home or equipment at home to work on?
Right. There's a lot in this industry, and there's actually we give each of our members a book. It's a Elementaries of Machining Industry book, and while they're in the program, while they're here, some of their day is spent in the classroom on that book. There's safety, there's math, there's blueprint reading, and other fundamentals. And so they were given work assignments from that book.
Thanks.
And I've got a question for Joe. Joe, you said you just reopened. I'm curious to know what kinds of things you had to think about to be able to reopen safely. I know a lot of nonprofits are struggling with how to reopen safely.
Well, you know, one of the things is that the industry that our social enterprise is in is considered a essential business. And so many of the machine shops are still operating. But we've gone through an analysis to figure out how we do this safely. And so we take temperature when everybody shows up in the morning. We maintain social distancing, mask, and then sanitation, throughout the day.
Great, thank you.
So we have some questions that came in from advance by people writing them in advance. So let me just ask a couple of these, and anybody can answer. So one of them is from Melissa from Corona Life Services. So in addition to government funding, what kinds of funds can other nonprofits look for?
I can get started on answering that, and then I'm sure other people will want to jump in.
Water.
Seeking some private funding from local private foundations is one way, and it's true that some of them are really focused on COVID-19, but others still have their regular programs in place. So I would go to San Diego Community Foundation, for example, and I can put some of these websites in the chat box also. There are also the bigger health foundations like California Wellness and Cal Endowment. They have good grant programs. You can also look on Philanthropy California. Now they have a COVID-19 specific relief fund, but there may be some other funding sources there too. So I'll put some of those websites up, and I don't know if others want to jump in with other funding ideas.
I have a suggestion from one of the participants today saying, don't forget non-cash contributions. So thanks for that suggestion as well. Yeah.
Maybe somebody has a lathe.
Right. Well, just, I think this question from Children's Choice Learning Connection, which is preschools in a number of different cities in the district, asks kind of the core question is, what can I do to keep our nonprofit business going? And so Assembly member in particular, given what you were talking about, right? The budget, all these other things, what advice do you have for nonprofits right now?
Well, various pieces of advice.
Mm-hmm.
It's very important for nonprofits to have a personal relationship with businesses and corporations.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a hard cold call to them. First of all, if you can be referenced to them, that's great. If you can't, you just call up and ask and say, hey, I'm XYZ nonprofit. Can I speak with your CEO? I made for 39 years a very good living in the insurance business by cold calling of all damn things. You can call up these companies, ask for the CEO, make sure to get through the screener, you tell them you're a nonprofit, and then when you talk to the CEO, say, hey, I know you're a great company and you help out a lot of people. Can we talk? That's all you got to do is say, can we talk? And then you shut up and listen to them.
I can see why you were successful in the insurance business. I'm glad you're not selling me any insurance today. I would end up buying more than I need, I'm sure.
Well, I would only sell you what you needed, not what you wanted.
You're right. I take that back. Mark and Joe, do you have suggestions for nonprofits? What are you seeing your organizations do or other organizations do that you think maybe people aren't paying as much attention to as they could be? And this is kind of a comment on this, just the questions just come into this, I think is important that, many nonprofits have fundraisers that have more than 100 people, maybe many more than 100 people. And of course, they're all canceled right now. And so what are people doing in absence of those, or when do we think that we can expect them to have them again? So Mark and Joe, what are your thoughts about fundraising in particular?
I'll jump in and then we'll hand it over to Joe, I guess. We do, a lot of events. We have an annual gala, big, nice dinner and fundraising event we've had for almost 50 years. Was scheduled for June 6th. That didn't happen this year. We postponed that to, September. In September seemed like a long way away in April, but now that we're sitting here in mid-June, we're looking at doing things differently. The comfort level of bringing 300 or 400 or 500 people into a local ballroom to raise a couple $100,000 is not going to happen. So, trying to be creative in that, we have not, from our perspective, spent a lot of time on fundraising right now, working with our donors. Our focus has been supporting our families, supporting the people in our homes, supporting people in the community. We're hopeful that our future events will come back, but right now we're not planning on our gala in September, our 200-300 people golf event that we have in October. We don't plan those happening. There's a significant shortfall that I think we need to be creative in what we're doing here at HGH and others. I mean, I think it impacts every nonprofit that does any fundraising at any level. So you're muted, Jan.
Sorry. I just have to say, we have to be creative, right? I mean, that makes it sound like you have to be a miracle worker.
Well, I think we do. I think, what we've been living through for the last 3 months. I was talking to your tech people before you got on, and my wife is binge watching the Ozarks on TV. I've been binge watching Zoom 7 days a week in meetings. Trying to keep up on everything that's going on, and whether that's directives from the county or our state partners. At first it changed by the day, then it was the hour, and now the rules change by the minute at times. We'll get a directive or something to work on. And as soon as we start looking at that, something else comes in and says, no, let's not go that way. Stop what you were doing. We'll come up with a new answer. So, it's definitely, long days to keep on top of everything.
Yeah, to open up a restaurant, there's a 77-page directive from the state. So go figure how you open up a restaurant with 77 pages of requirements. And if I may just jump in here with a personal opinion, what I find interesting about COVID is it's the first time in the history of the human race that a plague has hit us on the internet. In the old days, let's say the year 1400, the plague would sweep through Europe, village by village, city by city. Nobody knew it was coming. It hit you, a third of the people would die, it'd move on, and you had herd immunity. This one was the internet. Also, complete control of the population by the government. So this is uncharted territory for the human race. It truly is. And we're making it up as we go. The computer models have been flawed. So that's something to think of in the future as well. Prior planning didn't work. Post-planning, who knows what will come next? We don't know. And we're also getting ready to go into, in my opinion, once again, a possible Great Recession or depression, and that will suppress fundraising dramatically. So between the government cuts, because we're $54 billion in the hole, and possible economic disaster, who knows where we're going to be? Don't know. So that's my cheerful input.
Thanks for cheering us all up there. Thanks.
Yeah, I know.
Joe, what are your experience? Do you have events? How are you adapting around fundraising?
Well, we do have an annual, what we call Big Night Out event. It's usually scheduled later in the year. So we did have to move it back a little bit later than we had originally planned. But we try to do a diversification for our funding. So we do have some government funding coming in. We seek, probably the largest is individual donors. And then we've got family and corporate foundations that we apply to. But then, like Homeboy Industries, we have social enterprise, and that generates some revenue for the program. Randy talked about buying RiseUp coffee. We do sell RiseUp Industry coffee in Barron's Market and several other stores. None of our members are involved with that. We had originally started it believing it was going to be a social enterprise, and we'd train guys to be, roast coffee, grind it, package it, sell it. But then we stumbled onto the idea of the CNC machine shop, which is a much better trade for the population that we're working with. But when we eventually open up our prevention and intervention program and are working with a much younger population that aren't necessarily looking for a career yet, but just some employment training, we think the coffee, as well as the silk screening that we do, would be good employment training for them. So we're keeping them on. The other advantage, it generates a little bit of revenue for the program, but it also helps get our name out there as part of our marketing. What we'd really like to do and are moving towards is building up our customer base on our machine shop. There is such a need across the country, but specifically here in San Diego for this industry, that we believe we can, once we build our reputation up a little bit and do a little bit more marketing, we could increase our contract work there. That will probably never make us sustainable, but it'll be a large percent of our sustainability. And I think that's a positive thing for donors to hear, that you're not dependent totally on donations, that you're generating some of your own revenue.
Yeah, great point. So Assemblymember, so how are you holding committee meetings? Are you going to them in person right now, or are you going to Zoom meetings? And in terms of, you mentioned the kind of the tug of war, the tennis match between the legislature and the governor on the budget. So also tell us, what do you, if you were looking into a crystal ball, what do you think is going to happen with the budget?
Well, first of all, on committee meetings, it's very strange for me because I am an industry expert in insurance, and I have other skill sets that are in demand up in Sacramento. Unfortunately, sometimes they don't like to hear what I have to say, and I get fired from the committees. They take me off. And then a year later, they put me back on because they found out I was right. So once again, I'm the master of disaster. Seriously. God has a sense of humor. He puts me exactly where I am going to suffer the most and do the most good. It's weird as hell. Committee meetings up in Sacramento, we're doing committee meetings now in only large rooms with social distancing, the mask and all that. And we're doing more and more committee meetings on the floor of the assembly, which is a gigantic space. So yeah, like you guys, we're improvising. We're making it up as we go, but it is still effective. Strangely enough, it's working.
Great.
Now, crystal ball, don't have one. I have Starbucks here. That's about as close to a crystal ball as you're gonna get, okay? No one knows what's
You're
gonna
supposed
happen in the
to,
future.
hey, you're not supposed to be drinking Starbucks. You're supposed to be drinking RiseUp coffee.
I know. Yeah, Gail drank it all. It went fast. It was good coffee.
So you don't have any predictions, and so how it's going to be even harder for nonprofits to prepare when we don't have a sense of what's going to be happening. And of course, it's not just government money. Of course, it is absolutely individual donations, foundation contributions, but also, you know, even things like fees for service. Machine industries may be an exception, but so many organizations do have social enterprises that are actually suffering because they just can't have customers right now.
Yeah, and the other thing is, you know, I'm an old Navy guy, okay? We put all of our enterprises, nonprofit and profit, in mothballs and shut them down for 10 weeks. Now, everyone's got to get back up to speed. And it's taking longer than we thought. It costs more money than we thought. Didn't see that in the playbook. For instance, my Veterans of Foreign Wars post up in Sacramento had a overhead of $21,000 a month. Okay, and they were making their nut every month. They were profitable. They were good. Well, with the shutdown, it ended up $6,000 a month with no income. And you guys have faced the same thing. So how do you get back up to just running your air conditioning without the proper income? See, people don't crank that into their evaluations. The startup cost is very difficult. So we have to get through that too. And once again, I'm an optimistic person. I'm always looking for providence. Let's hope providence will help us out. And it's something I learned in Vietnam. You put one foot in front of the other, no matter how tired you are, no matter how deep it is, you just keep going. And everyone that I'm looking at here and that I know in the nonprofit, you guys got true grit. So just stick with it.
So Lucy, do you have any other policy issues in Sacramento than the ones we've already talked about that nonprofits should be aware of right now?
Well, I did want to mention, you know, Assemblymember, you signed our sign-on letter, and I did want to talk a little bit about contracts. One of the things we've been working on really hard is to get flexibility on state contracts, because we recognize that nonprofits are having to spend more on PPE, are having to reorganize their budgets to reopen. And we need those state contracts and local government contracts to be as flexible as possible so that people can use the money, nonprofits can use the money the way we need to be able to reopen and serve our community given the circumstances. So that's one thing that we've been fighting for and continue to fight for. So if you haven't signed on to the letter, you still can by going to our website, and we will put the information in the chat box for you. But if you're a nonprofit, you can still join on. So when we continue to push for that, we think it should be something that happens statewide so that there's some consistency across agencies so that nonprofits aren't having one policy with one agency and one policy with another. And then we've been working on some other relief efforts around commercial property tenancy, especially for some of the institutions that have had to remain closed. It's really challenging to be able to continue to maintain a facility when you have no revenue coming in and you are hoping to be able to open in the near future or far future, but need to keep a facility going in the meantime. So those are some other things that we're fighting for.
I'd like to thank CalNonprofits for your efforts in terms of, you know, looking at that consistency amongst departments or agencies. And I know everybody, I'm an optimist as well, everybody's doing the best they can, but there seems to be even more siloing, if you will, by departments and agencies right now. Different ideas, different directives that impact the same people, but conflicting information, if you will, coming out. And sometimes you feel like you just flip the coin and say, I guess we'll do the best we can and we'll deal with this later. So that is challenging. So I appreciate your efforts in that area very much. So.
Well, it creates more work, and that's the last thing we need when we're trying to serve our communities, you know, at an elevated rate already. I mean, the other thing that we're doing is working directly with the governor's office on trying to get some clarity around some of the reopening details. You know, if you're an essential service, you've been dealing with this for a long time now, but for a lot of other folks, they haven't been. And even though there are some lengthy guidances, as the Assembly member pointed out, there are some real gaps in information about what to do. We just did a webinar actually with GoBiz and some of the folks who are updating those guidances, and we're continuing to work with them specifically on nonprofit needs. And they'll be updating their guidances based on the conversations we're having and some of the information we're sharing with them about what nonprofits need. So stay tuned on that. And hopefully it won't be a 70-page guidance, but some real practical, to the point information that will really help nonprofits.
Hey, behind you, you got a bunch of hats up on your bookcase. What's the deal with the hats there?
Oh boy.
We're musicians. My partner is a musician, and he has a collection of hats that he wears on stage and at different performance venues. We do country music, and so it's apropos. Thank you for asking.
I'm looking at the background of everybody. Now, Mark has like family pictures and things, so he's really into that.
It's all for show. No, it's
no, look at that.
My wife puts them up there. That's right.
Yeah, and they're good-looking people. There's no ugly people there, you know. So Joe, what do you got?
My picture's not there. That's why. You know, there you go.
So I don't know if you all know this, but actually, CalNonprofits, we have a social enterprise as well, and it's an insurance business. For example, we provide health insurance to about 23,000 nonprofit employees, and property and casualty like general liability and directors and officers, workers' comp insurance. So Assembly member, if you ever decide to quit politics and you want to go back into insurance, we might be able to find an opening for you somewhere. So
you know what? I have 5 different insurance licenses and 3 different investment licenses.
Great.
Who knows?
So we're out of time, so maybe we can just have a couple of closing remarks. We'll start with Lucy, and then Mark, and then Joe, and then Assembly member, you can wrap it up and close it off for us.
Roger that.
Okay, just quickly, I would encourage everybody in this webinar, all the participants, to continue to reach out to elected officials and let those elected officials know what you're doing in your communities and what you need to continue to do the great work that you're doing. And, you know, we've got the Assembly member here, but reach out to your local officials too at city and county.
The big picture here.
Yeah. Okay, that's it for me. Who's next?
What did I do?
They did this.
Oh, they did it.
Yeah,
okay.
You're fine, Assembly member. Yeah.
All right. So I'll show you my background. Can you guys see the flags?
Yes.
See, I'm Navy. U.S. Navy, not the North Korean Navy, but the U.S. Navy. So those are signal flags that you run up the flagpole on the ships. And in the U.S. Navy signal book, the red one here is Bravo. That is Zulu. Bravo Zulu in the Navy stands for well done.
Yeah.
So to all of you today, bravo Zulu.
Thanks. Mark, do you have any closing comments?
No, I would just thank CalNonprofits, the Assembly member for putting this together, and also would echo what Lucy said. You know, reach out to your local elected officials. We know we have Assemblymember Voepel support. You know, as the budget is in the last hours of I think coming together. You know, key players will be the Senate Pro Tem Tony Adkins, which will be key in what this looks like for us as a state and as nonprofits. So if you're in San Diego and a constituent, or if not, I think reaching out to the Pro Tem, the governor's office, and the Assembly Speaker Rendon would be critical. Like yesterday be better than today, but today be okay. But contact your legislators and advocate for your needs and those that you're supporting.
Joe.
Oh, and one add-on comment to that is the San Diego delegation to the Assembly, even though we have different political viewpoints, the San Diego delegation is very tight. And Shirley Weber is a woman with a bigger heart than anyone I know. She's a good resource. So is Todd Gloria, Waldron, all of them. We all work together for San Diego in our area. So you can always reach us in the aggregate.
And I'd like to, I'll jump back again to echo what Randy said. I mean, you know, maybe an understatement with the political differences. But, you know, I spoke to Dr. Weber, Assemblymember Weber. She said, you know, I keep telling you, Mark, be a squeaky wheel. You need to start squeaking really loud right now.
Yep.
That's your best chance. So.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. Thanks, panelists, for joining us, and thanks to everybody who are making this such an interesting conversation. And all I can say is the closing is kind of like bravo Zulu. Does that work, Assembly member?
That works.
Okay, thanks. All right. Have a good rest of your day, everybody, and a good weekend. Bye,
Thank you
everybody.
very much. Take care.
And God bless you all. You're doing the Lord's work.